feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast. We're brought to you by Prize Picks, coming at you Wednesday afternoon. It's January 1st. Happy New Year. Coming up on today's show, we have the Wolves' loss against the Oklahoma City Thunder last night to look at, and we can kind of take stock of where the team is at on January 1st as we start 2025 before they it keeps coming, right? The gauntlet of their schedule right now. They play the Celtics tomorrow night. So, we'll take stock of where the Wolves are at here at the beginning of 2025. Talk about the Thunder game. To get into all that, I have Britt Robson from MinPost with me, who got up early this morning to write a column on that loss to the Thunder, and just sort of the gap between where the Thunder and the Wolves appear to be at right now. Britt, you wrote more broadly about the style of the two teams, which was definitely something I was taking notes on during the game. That'll be obviously can be a topic we drill into, but you also lined up the team's two best players and where Anthony Edwards and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander are at, kind of within the context of their own teams, and specifically the comfort levels they appear to have in the roster constructions that they are in. It kind of last night was really a highlighter over that in what Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was able to do and what Anthony Edwards wasn't able to do. So let's just let's start there. What popped there?
Well, obviously, Ant got off to a good start, which has not always been the case lately. He had 15 points in the first half, as did SGA. Mm-hmm. Very similar stat lines in many respects. And the Wolves are up 6 at the half. But you kind of knew that at the very least, OKC would get into one of those runs. If you've seen OKC at all, you know that their runs, like the Timberwolves last year, sometimes just come because teams just can't get past them in any way, shape, or form. Their on-ball defense is incredible. Their traps and recoveries are the best in the league, bar none this year. And the Wolves are prone to turning the ball over. This is the third year in a row that they've been in the bottom 10. I think right now they're 24th. I don't know because they turned it over 24 times, whether they were like 23rd or 22nd before this. But you knew that I pulled a stat from John Schumann, the invaluable John Schumann's Monday column about power rankings, and he said that their turnover ratio is the best it's in the NBA in 26 years, and that their defense overall points allowed per possession relative to the league average is the best since play-by-play data has been taking place since 29 years ago. And you've got a team of the Wolves who are flawed on offense. So all that is to set up the answer to your question, which is you needed a really strong game, probably 4 quarters, but at the very least, a response, almost a personal response from Ant once this expected run was going to happen. And instead, he disappeared. There was the third quarter was 43-23. The run on that was 36-10. The crucial run. Mike Conley hit a trio of 3-pointers. The last one, look at what I found, a banker on a heat check kind of. Suddenly they were up 12, and then the next thing you knew, less than a minute and a half later, the lead was 2. And Ant played 9 minutes and 3 seconds of that quarter. He had a personal foul and a turnover. That was it on his stat line. Which is pretty incredible if you think about it. And then in the fourth quarter, hold
on, can we pause on that part?
Sure.
Just because that's the superstar thing, right? Like nobody's doubting that Ant is a star. The superstar thing that needs to be that happens there is you need to do something in the midst of that run that Oklahoma City is clearly going on so as to help, if it's not yourself individually, the group. And I think that is the thing for me with Ant this season. Well, I give him some grace because these teams are doing literally everything they can to take away Ant offensively. I mean, Hartenstein, quote unquote, guarding Rudy last night was a joke.
Right.
Like that, everything was loaded up on Ant. And he's seen that all year. This is the best team he's seen that against. But he needs to be able to do something to get somebody else going at that time, or he needs to do something defensively. He needs to be like, and he did have that Shea matchup for a while. Like, he needs to give him a couple possessions of like, nope, it's not going through Shea on this possession. Like, it's got to be J-Dub here, or it's got to be an action. And I think when Ant is in a better rhythm, playing a more joyful version of basketball, he clicks into some of those things more often. He's never been a great playmaker. He's never been a great like awareness of like control of the game, Harden, Jokic, SGA style, but he does do it sometimes. And it was very glaring that last night he didn't do it at all. Oklahoma City deserves credit for that because they're really, really good. But if Ant was at SGA's level,
right,
you would have seen something else there, which again, an incredible level. But that's part of the distinction there and disappointment.
And we've seen Ant, quote unquote, try to take over games to better or lesser extent.
But that's not what we're talking about. Yeah.
And you think then, okay, he's sabotaging his team. If your team has turned it over 9 times while scoring like 10 points in a quarter, they desperately need whatever it is that you're going to come up with your, hands on the ball, and you're the playmaker.
Be like, I got it, Julius. You're not initiating anymore. Or Mike, you just got ripped. Like, I got it. If you're the star, you're like, we are not going to get ripped again here. I got it. And Ant has the skill set to be able to do that. They need him to step up in that way to beat, to be a title contender, to be able to beat the Thunder type team. Sorry.
Right. No, that's okay. And so again, it comes back to year 5, morphing into, the Olympics with LeBron and Steph. We hear all the old narratives about, he's going to learn from the best how to win and what a great experience this Olympics will be. And, the setup is always these chimeric, narratives of, everything is going to fall into place and everything is going to be, roses, and teams will sell out to try to stop him. And the Wolves themselves have done a poor job this season of both schematically in terms of Finch, but also in terms of the rest of his teammates understanding the kind of help he needs. And not to take it all on that, Ant needs to figure out how he can best combat this stuff. We heard, again, the positive vibe, the spin. Ant's getting all kinds of double teams. This is like a 3-year-old narrative. He's learning how to beat them. And now he has, increasingly begun to beat them. And he knows how to get off the double teams. What's almost as concerning, and perhaps more concerning, now that I think about it in what I wrote about, was his assist to turnover ratio is the lowest of his career. This is a guy who's developed the 3-point shot to the extent that he's kind of like a poor man's Steph out there, and he spaces the floor. If there's 2 on the ball out on the perimeter, he's got to be able to get off the ball and be able to move and then move without the ball, which is really something that has never happened in his career that needs to happen. And these things have to happen quickly. Quick decision-making and offensive prowess are a through line with this team ever since Finch came on board. In fact, one of the failures of Finch as a coach, in my opinion, is that he keeps expecting his team to get it, but he isn't willing to ram it down their throat that, if you don't get off the ball, if you don't, instead, like he puts Julius Randle out there in a situation where he has to get off the ball quickly. And lo and behold, Julius Randle's play increases tremendously. And then lo and behold, when he's out there with the starters against a really rapacious Oklahoma City team that loves to pick pockets, he's back to the same old crab dribbles.
Right.
I mean, this is kind of an old movie here. And the bottom line
can we go to the Finch part of that, though?
Sure.
Because how did you just say that? How did you say it? Of Finch needing to...
He needs to practice what he preaches, really is what it comes down to.
Demand it.
He preaches, movement without the ball movement, and movement without the ball, and quick decision making. Those are the three ingredients of a flow offense.
Yeah.
Movement without the ball, ball movement, and quick decisions to do that.
Right.
Ant is not very good at any of those in year 5, and so.
So what do you do as Finch? You go, okay, well, he's not good at this stuff. So, like he's still your star player. Like, how do you go about handling that?
Well, this is where I feel, again, I don't want this to become a Julius Randle bashing session, but this is where Randle gets in the way.
Yeah.
I mean, Finch is figuring out the best ways to enable Randle, presumably to either boost his trade value or to get a good look as to, hey, do we really want to keep this guy?
I don't think it's either of those things. I think he thinks he's clearly the second best player on the team and thinks he drives. I think that's what Finch's thought process is. I don't think Finch is thinking about escalating his trade value. I think that's something people like us would talk about, or people like that would talk about on Twitter. And I'm not, this might be even a further indictment of Finch. Like, I think Finch thinks great basketball can come out of the Randle and Edwards pairing. I mean,
and it can, but not with the offense that Finch wants to run. You can't have those two thoughts in your head at the same time. That Julius Randle is the second best offensive player on the team, and that you need to move without the ball, move the ball, and make quick decisions.
See, and I think you can if you thread a very specific and very small needle, which is effective offensive inclusion of Rudy Gobert. And that is another thing that Anthony Edwards is awful at. I mean, and it is like these games. I mean, does everybody else see this? Like, these teams don't give a fuck about Rudy, man.
Right.
And so what you need to do is, if you're Ant, like, you got to hit it. You got to hit it. You got to hit it. Like, they need that you need to go to that. It needs to be hit him on the short roll. He needs to make a playoff. You hit him there, and he needs to be a lob. He needs to be able to go to that over and over and over again. So they stop doing that, or you need to stop playing Rudy and Ant together. Like, it's not going to work.
Or
like, there is not a middle ground there of Ant. Ant doesn't think Rudy's going to catch it.
I think there is a middle. I think there is a middle ground, but again, it's one that gets punted, which is having Mike Conley be the primary mover of the offense. I mean, that's what's worked in the past when those three, when Conley, Ant, and Rudy are on the floor together. Conley sets the example. Ant loves Conley, admires everything he does, and in his short attention span gets it in his head. Hey, that's working today, and begins to work it. But when Conley is splitting the playmaking duties with Randle and Ant, then there is. It's not a coincidence that Randle and Conley are oil and water together.
No, well, for sure. And I'm, to be clear, like, I'm not even saying like Rudy is a great option there. I understand the hesitation from Conley too.
He's gotten worse with his hands, for that matter. I mean, and that that dunk, OKC parted the waves on that dunk for him.
It's crazy, man. It's crazy. It's like he's being treated in the paint like the guy that's ignored in the corner. You know what I'm saying? And that's a harder shot to make for a lot of guys. Like for Jaden McDaniels. Remember last year when they would play the Thunder all the time? Yeah. Like Josh Giddey's like, he's like, Rudy's not guarding me. I'm wide open here. And it's that mental sort of drain, and your offense has to be directed to it. Well, OKC is directing the offense towards Gobert, and the Wolves are like, well, we don't really want to do that. Like, the players are. But Finch is still like, keep going to it, or keep playing with this group. And what that's just going to get to is like, okay, screen and roll. They put two on the ball. All right, Julius is at the elbow. Let's see him isolate with 8 seconds left on the clock. Like it devolves because what the players appear to believe in on the floor when they're playing completely is contrary to what Finch is putting out there, asking them to do. And obviously McDaniels and the lack of his shot and offensive creation there is a big deal too, which is just like the 40th different way. We've talked about the starting five being a terrible fit together of those five guys. But if we're talking, I'm bringing it up because we're talking specifically about Ant.
Right.
And I'm saying Ant needs to be a lot better. It's just they're putting him in an environment that is difficult for him to be better in. Or it's just a harder, more narrow one. Like, look at the way Oklahoma City spreads the floor out for Shai. It's an easier environment for Shai to get his. Ant's environment is tough, and he doesn't do himself any favors by taking advantage of what Jaden can do offensively, what Rudy can do offensively. And it leads to this bogged down thing. And we're sitting here this morning being like, well, Ant and SGA are in completely different tiers.
And what's crazy about that is that Ant, a year and a half ago, could get to the rim as well as SGA. And SGA is getting doubled. It's just that it is a harder double because of their scheme and because everybody is bought into a certain system. And not for nothing, the way the roster has been constructed, let's bring Tim Connolly versus Sam Presti into this. Yeah. You don't lose anybody and you add Hartenstein and Caruso. Okay, you lost Giddey. But it's essentially you lost the guy who everybody was wondering whether or not the team would be better if he was on the bench.
Yep.
And the Wolves, and no harm there, but Slow-Mo and Monty Morris are ball protectors who are selfless. They get the ball to different people at different times. Both would be beneficial to Ant if they're on the court. Julius Randle is not.
Cat, and Cat would have been.
Yeah. And it isn't. I lose a little bit of patience sometimes with people who, a lot of people who were ripping Cat a year ago are now his biggest offenders because it's the easy thing to do. But I would say that I went the other way. I did not give enough credence to Cat's value as a versatile fit. He isn't great at that fit, but he is versatile enough that he can be not a wart on the system. He can be somebody who blends the system enough. It's
defensively, he did a good job of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and even offensively to some extent, he held the ball and turned it over some to himself.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, that's true. But I also think that he doesn't. The thing that will probably always alienate me about Randle is that he's a purposeful grenade giver. He basically waits until there's 5 seconds on the clock and then zips a pass after holding it for 12 seconds. And yes, it is an open look, but it is an open look that the person has no discretion. The person who gets the ball has been dictated by Randle. This is what you do. This is where you have the ball right now, right there. This is your shot. Right. But if there's no creativity involved, you were at the service of Julius Randle's assistant.
Oh, close.
I know, almost. So essentially, compare that to people who, just zip the ball around. And not that Cat always did that, but Cat did take some pride in being a part of ball movement early.
In Gobert-centric lineups, Cat could be a mover. Randle has not shown to be a mover in not Gobert-centric, right. Gobert-included lineups. Right. Randle has shown to be a mover in the Reed when he's out there with Reed, and it's a spread floor look.
And not coincidentally, he and DiVincenzo really do. They have a connection. They look for each other. And, maybe it's, the two new guys or whatever, but Randall seems to understand, and maybe it is just familiarity, or maybe it's that, everybody kind of knows the score, and Randall knows that, this is a guy, if anybody's riding with me on this roster, it's this guy,
Yeah, right.
And so
let me grab our first break, and then, well, obviously we got a lot more to get to with this one. But want to let you all know that today's show is brought to you by Treasure Island Resort and Casino, and they are doing a watch party for the Vikings-Lions game this Sunday night. They had one for Vikings-Packers last week. A lot of people were there. Looked like a lot of fun. Kyle and I did one for a that Wolves-Kings game back in, I think it was November. It's really a great space. It's called the Parlay Lounge. They got like a ton of TVs all over the place, like you would in a normal sports book, but there's a bar there. They're going to have a lot of stuff going on there. It's free food for their watch parties. And then they have drink specials on Miller Lite and Absolute Wild Berry. If either of those are your drink of choice. They give away a bunch of prizes. Like they gave away a bunch of like Wolves gear when we were there. They'll do that with Viking stuff, and also just a bunch of in casino promotion stuff there too. So really fun place to watch the game. A little bit of a drive, but I think if you commit to go in there on Sunday, I think you'll have a good time. For more information and a full list of Island Watch Party, or the Island Watch Party schedule, you can go to ticasino.com. Today's show is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Maybe if you're listening to this later this afternoon, obviously there's a bunch of college football on there, but I literally don't even know the name of any college football players, so I can't help you out that much. But I was just looking around on here. It's like Malik Beasley. I'm gonna watch that Magic Pistons game. You could throw him in there. But Batase here is more or less than 13 rebounds and assists. Play around with this. But the one thing I wanted to say for today is if you do have a Prize Picks account, they're doing a free $25 lineup just on New Year's Day. So take advantage of that. Again, if you just do like a two-player lineup, you hit that Beasley and Batadze one or whatever college football one, and both of those two pieces hit, you're going to get $75 in your account there without risking anything. Obviously, they're just wanting you to try out the platform. I think it's a lot of fun, and particularly, like fantasy football over and all that stuff. It's a fun thing to try out. If you do, want to try it out, you can just play for like $5. When you make your first $5 lineup, if you use the promo code Dane when you sign up, they'll also credit your account with $50. So if it is something you want to do, love it. If you let them know that you came from us, use that promo code Dane when you sign up. But take advantage of that free $25 if you already do have an account. Again, that's prizepicks.com or the PrizePicks app, promo code Dane. All right. All of that, I was like trying to put together like an outline to this, Britt, and then I read your column, and it all just kind of blurs together here. With that game, right? But one thing I wanted to talk about was specific to this matchup is the collision of styles, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in the Wolves and the Thunder obviously have very different ones, and I think in a way, and I talked about this with Jace on Monday. I was like, I think in theory, a punishing style like the Bucks and how they played, big punishing style, the Bucks and how they played them and beat them in the NBA Cup could be a little bit of a kryptonite to this Thunder team. However, you got to kind of stay with it to what we were talking about before. For all 48 minutes, you need to punish that. And I think the Wolves' only really way they imposed their size in this game was Nas. He was aggressive early and often, getting downhill just as a bigger player.
Right.
Whereas Oklahoma City's imposement of their style was that ball pressure to disrupt your offense and the execution of their offense to kind of slowly start stacking this up on you eventually.
Right.
You're going to score at a lower rate against us offensively than we know that in the aggregate we're going to score against you. They are a math equation, but it doesn't look like it. And that one last night, particularly in the third quarter, where were there? I know we talked about the Ant part of it, but where were there further opportunities for the Wolves to impose their style in that game, did you think?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned both the Bucks and I would say Dallas in the finals or the conference semifinals. Because they're big, but they're quick and they go quick. The thing about Dallas was, Luka and Kyrie always had the option of the lob or the corner tray, and contrast that with Ant and Randall doing a lot of dribbling, and Conley, basically Conley was the outlet 3 guy, and he was also the pull-up 3 guy, and he had been given marching orders in neon by Finch to be more aggressive. Yep. And I think he's begun to realize that his minutes are kind of at stake if he doesn't start to, light a fire under the starting lineup. And so he was as aggressive as I've seen him in terms of getting his own shot last night.
Mike was great. Yeah, that was encouraging.
And so that was good. But I think that when your playmakers are not quick decision makers, it's such a sabotage of this team's philosophy. And remember Pat Bev. Pat Bev is not a good point guard, but Pat Bev will go out there and make something happen. What you really need is somebody with the swagger out there to just say, all right, I'm doing this, and this is the way I'm doing it, but quickly.
Yeah.
If OKC is given time to figure out what you're doing, they will smother you. And they did smother them. I mean, their hands, first of all, everybody on that team is looking for deflections. And they're all quick. I got guys who nobody's ever heard of, this rookie Mitchell. I mean,
AJ, come on, man. You never heard of AJ Mitchell?
Well, you know what I mean. Relatively speaking, the 8th man in like a 27-5 team is usually somebody that isn't AJ Mitchell. And so
he's a rookie. What do you mean? Like he's playing well. Yeah.
He is playing well. But all right, it's Casson Wallace then. How about that? I mean,
dude, he was the most active hands in the state. Don't shortchange what the Thunder are. Right?
Well, but what I'm saying is, were they those guys when they joined that team?
I don't know. Well, there was a rookie. He's a rookie. Right. Wallace is a second-year player. What it is they
do a great job
an environment
perfectly.
Right. Yes, yes, okay.
All right, and so
I guess we agree.
So I guess I should have said more developing latent talent rather than developing guys who were clearly highly prized people in the draft.
For sure. Yeah.
So
Wiggins.
They bring them into the Thunder way, And the Thunder way is what amounts to, you see it in football sometimes where you have these linebackers, safety, people like what Flores does for the Vikings in terms of mixes coverage, floods the zone, goes back, gives you a lot of different looks, but is essentially always being unpredictable and pressure packed.
Yes.
And that's what they do. And they do it with their feet. They constantly are moving around. They do it with their hands. They seek deflections a lot. They do it they play big in terms of the fact that they want to close out. They want to trap you. They want to do all the things that connote ball pressure. And if you are not prepared for that, or if you are seeking to determine your own options, I'm becoming more and more convinced that just making a quick decision is almost as important as making the right decision. If you make the right decision a split second late, it's not as right as it was that split second before.
So Nas was doing last night.
And he has done it. I mean, that's one of the reasons he sometimes gets into these turnover, these ruts. I mean, there are people who do that.
Dante too is kind of that, all of that.
Exactly. But guess what? Yeah, and Na too.
Yeah.
Who are the 3 best plus minus guys on the team? I mean,
it's profitable in the aggregate.
Nas is not having a good shooting year, and he's nails in terms of plus minus in terms of if he steps on the floor Now, last night was a gross example of that not happening. The bench was part of that getting wiped out third quarter. But I do think that you ask the best way to counter what the Thunder do. It is being confident, being strong, and using your length. And that's what the Mavs did when they got Gafford and Washington against everybody. Yeah. And it really worked against the Thunder. Now, obviously, the Thunder didn't have Hartenstein then, but they did have Chet, who's a very different version of a big. But that is, and the Bucks, I mean, Giannis is like kryptonite for the way the Thunder play, because he will draw fouls that, are fouls, because he's just so strong. Yeah. And he's so quick. And Giannis is getting better at understanding the game. He's a fully mature superstar.
Right.
He's not going to get any better than he is now, but he is really, really good now. Mm-hmm.
And that's a distinction to make from that. That's kind of the Ant thing we were talking about.
Exactly.
Too. And what Giannis like 28 or something like that. Like Ant in 5 years we'll get more of this. Because remember, I mean, it was
right.
Build the wall against Giannis, and there were things.
Oh yeah, I mean, and I remember, I did a story on Chris Middleton way back about 7 or 8 years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Anyway, who knows? It's a while back. But Giannis, right? Yeah. Giannis wasn't probably the best player on that team at that time, but everybody kind of knew he would be.
Yeah, right.
So, but the point is, that's why they got Caruso and Hartenstein, because they need people who just, if you're big and strong and quick, you're going to have to run over me because I'm not going to give way, Right. And that kind of toughness. I mean, Jalen Williams is great, but he doesn't have that toughness. He's a little bit more of a finesse defender. And to be fair, he's undersized. He's 6'6", playing the 4 right now. But Hartenstein is that way. Caruso's that way. Lou Dort is certainly that way. You get those 3 guys out there. It's just going to really be hard if you're not going very quickly and making a lot of good decisions and having the kind of top-end talent like Ant, who is going to be able, when Ant is on his game, he's like one of the dozen people in the NBA who can't be stopped if he's in his element.
Yeah, so I think the distinction to make there is when the Thunder are guarding the Wolves, the force of nature is Anthony Edwards, whereas it's Giannis Antetokounmpo for the Milwaukee.
Right. Very different, right?
And Dort, Caruso, and Williams can do a better job of slowing a 6'4", 230-pound Ant, just based on Ant's the kind of like size and dimensions,
right? Because
they're those size and dimensions, because they're big for wings,
right?
Giannis is 6'11" and 270. He's physically imposing over them, so that's what I
can jump out of the gym on top of it,
right? But my main point is I think for the Wolves to beat this Thunder team, they would have needed to do it with their 4s and 5s. Ant has to play well too, but that's where they could impose it. And that's why I go, if Cat was in that game yesterday, is Cat able to impose his will offensively more? Maybe straight voltage, you get stripped and all that sort of stuff.
Sure.
And it's, it's a wash with what Randall did last night, which was just get ripped before he even started getting downhill.
Right.
But I think in theory, Cat could have been better because he's bigger than Jalen Williams, you know, and Rudy too, which needs to be able to impose himself physically because he's bigger than Hartenstein, or he's bigger than the other guy who's kind of, they stashed AJ Mitchell on him for a little bit of time. Like that's whatever team beats the Thunder, or if a team does beat them, they are going to impose their size, which I think is a difference than imposing your strength, because Ant has strength to impose, not as much size as.
Right. And let me add another thing. I think it's really important, and it doesn't have to be the Thunder, but it has to be a really quality team, to beat a really quality team, you have to know what you're doing. I mean, I'm dead serious. At a real visceral, like second nature level, you have to know, okay, they're coming here. I know this guy's over here. He'll come and set the screen for me. Do I take it? Meanwhile, I know this guy's in the corner. I know I got a lob over there. If this guy will go baseline, if I clear the screen. I mean, it's repetitions, structure. It's familiarity, it's structure, obviously, is a part of it. But it is also born of constant repetition and familiarity and guys knowing that that's what they are going to do yesterday, tomorrow, 3 weeks from now. Yeah. I mean, Mike Conley isn't going to complain, but at least not to us. But I've got to imagine he has been weirdly marginalized. He's not the guy who basically tells everybody, okay, this is who we are. This is what we're going to do. Calm down here. Let's run a pick and roll. I got Rudy on this. Or Ant, just get the ball back to me. I'll make sure you get it. He can't go to Ant and say, give me the ball. I'll make sure you get it back. Ta-da, ta-da, ta-da. Because Randall is going to get the ball somewhere in the middle of that. And you know, and again, I'm not slagging on Randall so much as I'm saying that he's not only a new element, but he is a large element. He displaces a lot of other people's agendas.
An important element, which is Mike Conley. Yeah. And you know, we have to start the Conley premise on the belief of whether he's washed or not. And a lot of people could point to stats to suggest it. I get people making that. My personal opinion, watching it all the time, I think Conley is more marginalized by the environment than he is washed. He's probably 90%, or he's less than what he was last year, but I don't think he just all of a sudden got dashed. And you need him to be in more environments where he's not marginalized. I think that would be a huge elixir to this team. And Britt, I think he should come off the bench. I do. I think that's the answer for that. One, because I just don't think Finch is going to take Randall out of that thing. So if a change has to happen, because I'm starting to like envision Mike Conley in a role where you're like, okay, Mike's coming on now, and now this group is playing this way, you know? Whereas Mike comes out with the starters, and it's like the identity of what the starting group is has nothing to do with Mike Conley. But if Mike Conley were to cycle in like where Nikhil comes into the game, or, you know, it's like the start of the late first, start of the second quarter, it's like, okay, Conley's in the game now, and now they're running the offense through him. Whereas when he's off the floor, you know, Ant is the primary initiator, Julius is that. I think it would give Conley a role. I mean, he just seems like this, like.
Would you go DDV or Nah as a starter then?
The numbers are awful when it's Dante. But is that a product of Dante being bad at the beginning of the season in that group?
Right.
You know,
I don't know. I mean, I do.
I think Dante's a better player than Nikhil. So I would probably say Dante. You know, just like overall, that's not a slag on Nikhil. Everybody knows I love Nikhil. But like, I think I don't know what the answer is to that part of it.
Right. Sure.
But I think that's the change to me that makes most sense. And I can even see like a world where that benefits Mike. I struggle to see a world where like you take Jaden out and you replace him with Nikhil. Is it like, you know, Jaden just kind of comes in as this like, you know, just like, oh, he's just in the game now.
Right.
Micah could be something there. Obviously the Julius one, we've explained that up and down a million ways. I could see the logic of Nas over Julius, and then you lean into Julius with the second unit. You need to tweak some. We've seen some good things with him in the second unit, but it's all the second unit guys. So he's in the second unit. Now he's actually playing with the starters more than he is currently. I think the path of least resistance to a roster change is Mike Conley, and it's the one where I can picture it changing that individual player's production individually. Yeah.
Well, I have been on the season-long bandwagon of Nas over Randall in the starting lineup, but I do think recent games have undercut that somewhat when they give Randall the big. because then you have Rudy as a
Yep.
lurker. Then you have the old familiarity of, the other guys know what to do. McDaniels in particular knows what to do when he has to help a little bit more. If the big on Randall or Cat, as the case may be, last 2 seasons, and it's on Randall's side of the court. If Randall's on the strong side, he can help. And I do think we need to figure out, or the Finch needs to figure out a way to make Rudy Gobert again. I mean, what happened against Cat and what happened against, the Houston dude twice is
and
just
last night, man. I mean, what was
I know
what did Rudy do
nothing
last
there,
night?
right?
Nothing.
Right.
It's nothing. And then there are some of the other. I mean, he had 10 offensive rebounds against Wemby on Sunday. It's not like Rudy is never good.
Yeah, and
It's
again,
just
and
against
part
a
of that
certain
was
way.
that because Wemby's out there chucking threes sometimes, and and so you're right though. People forget that Ant and Gobert are really, if you're saying tear it down to the studs, from a GM perspective, the studs right now are Gobert and Ant. And that may not be a wise decision, but that's the de facto decision.
Right.
You've got a guy with a 3-year contract for pretty much $100 million, and then you got Ant, who you want to sign for whatever it takes into perpetuity. And so then you got one guy who anchors your defense and one guy who anchors your offense, and you hope to make them both better two-way players. But right now, even the anchoring is not working.
Yeah.
The defense of Gobert is not an anchor. The offensive Ant is not an anchor right now. And that's hard. I mean, I finished the column by saying, with all the things I'm looking at, I can't believe they're 17 and 15.
Yeah.
I mean, in some ways it's a credit, to all the cool things that, DiVincenzo's rebounding and Nas hustle and Ant, despite everything we've been saying about him, he's still having a pretty miraculous year.
It's like, is there like what the record is and what feels so uncomfortable about watching them makes you go, okay, well, maybe there are a few small adjustments away from making this work.
Right.
But then as we do literally every day on the show, is like try to talk about those adjustments and like when you take that right turn down that path, you're like, okay, that adjustment runs into this, into that. I was even just doing that last night with like, how are they going to match up with OKC? And you just run into this wall and that wall. And what we're talking about is, at least right now, just pretty unambiguously a roster construct that doesn't make sense.
And it's in limbo as a result. Yeah. I mean, and one of the things that is really an unfortunate fallout of this, you can agree or disagree with the fact that Finch likes 8 men and a 9th man who plays maybe double-digit minutes if he's feeling generous. But you've got a pretty interesting group of bench guys who have high ceilings. Mm-hmm. And this limbo that we're in, like, let's try this. If we try this, this has to happen. Let's see if this works. The only way that experiment gives you any kind of useful information is if you keep those guys on the bench. Come on. And so it is very reminiscent. I wrote this in the column too. It's very reminiscent of 2 years ago, with the huge difference that you knew Cat was a part of the firmament, and you have no idea whether. You strongly suspect that Randall is trade fodder and won't be with the team, either if he takes his option and stays next year or doesn't. That will be his terminus. But in the meantime, you got to figure him out, I guess, and you're not going to write him off. Yeah,
and they're starting to find some things, like they found
they
Reed
put
and Randall
a lot of
and
energy
Finch
into it. Exactly, and I worry about the opportunity cost of that energy. Quite frankly,
that's a great point. I'm gonna grab another one. Today's show is brought to you by Doer Jeans, DUER. They're my favorite item of clothing. I have they're that like the comfortable pair of like sweatpants or something like that you wear around home. Be like, I'm probably not going to wear that out to like the grocery store or dinner. This is a pair of jeans or pants that have that same comfort that you're going to want to wear at home. I literally like wear mine around when I could be wearing sweatpants all the time. They are extremely comfortable. They're made from like recycled materials, plant-based fibers. That one is a good way to make clothing, but two kind of gives it a little bit more of that breathability, softness, and moisture absorption. I was suggesting it as a Christmas gift for those of you to buy somebody in your life, but like I've been saying this week, buy yourself a Christmas present. Try these out. You can check out their flagship stores in LA or Denver. I know we got a handful of listeners who live in the LA area or Denver, but you can also just shop online at shopdoer.com/DaneMoore. Put that Dane Moore in. My listeners get 20% off their first purchase. Again, with that exclusive URL, shopduer.com/DaneMoore. It's a great deal. Don't wait to get 20% off now. Go to shopdoer.com/DaneMoore. I think we're starting to kind of get into Finch here, Britt. And obviously a lot of this is with the rotations and stuff. And
right.
Because I spend a lot of time like thinking about that, I do understand some of the difficulties that he's running into, though question like potentially making a roster change. The thing that I struggle with Finch from like a technical standpoint is the continuing to do things away, expecting a different result.
Mm-hmm.
And the top line item here, specifically related to last night, is not taking timeouts in the middle of these runs. And we know there's a extensive list of coaches of really good coaches who have employed the strategy of kind of letting their players play through it. Honestly, I've never really got why that is like a good thing, but it's worked. So we can't say it doesn't work. I think with this group in particular, that is just about as kind of like messy as it is talented, even just specifically Ant. Like, I think sometimes in those runs, because your star player is a 23-year-old Anthony Edwards, who is more sparkle than he is precision, sometimes you got to get him back precise. And it's hard. And I know a lot of the fan base is extremely frustrated about that third quarter and letting it kind of ride through that. And again, like kind of letting it ride now through 32 games with this starting lineup that, very much doesn't, hasn't made sense.
Right.
Yet. I struggle with that part of Finch while, still thinking he has a good, obviously he's a smart basketball person, has a grip of it, but that part, I don't know. I struggle with what I'm watching, and I don't understand what his logic is in some of these situations. And frankly, I don't think when he's talked to us in press conference has done as good of a job of explaining what it is he's aiming at this season, or what he's not doing. I mean, how many times to be like, I probably should have closed with Nazir, or, that one's on me. There's been a lot of that, and not a lot of backing up of why he's doing it the way that he's doing it, which is leading people to be like, he's doing this wrong. He's making wrong decisions a lot. Where are you at on Finch, and specifically the timeouts thing last night?
Well, I mean, to be fair, he did call a timeout after a 9-0 run, and so obviously the run was 26, so it was still 17 more to go after the 9. He certainly could have called a timeout, between that, I think it was 65, 63 or something at that point, a 10-0 run or a 9-0 run. And if they got another 7 points or something, all right, it's not uncommon for somebody to call 2 timeouts during an incredible
camera kept
run.
going to him, and he was just had that pierced lip face on of like, I'm not doing it,
Right. I think that's legit. I would say where I have some empathy for him is that they made a move that in the long run is a good move, paying Cat in 28, 29. I think they realized that the team was not going to be as good without Cat, but they also thought it wasn't going to be as corrosive as it turned out. I certainly didn't think that. I do think that, and I'm mind reading here now, but Finch doesn't have the faith in Dillingham that Tim Connolly does, in my opinion. Tim Connolly really thought that Dillingham could be a plug and play guy. At least that's what he said after the draft. They went out and got DiVincenzo, and I think that, according to John Krasinski's reporting and some other people on the inside, DiVincenzo broke the deal. I mean, basically that's how the deal was made. They wanted a bridge. And then I'm sure Conley went to Finch and said, can you work with this guy? And then he could. I mean, they really like each other. They respect each other. Which is all to say, I think Finch is in the position I'm in, and perhaps you are, only in a much more invested way, as I had no idea that it was going to be this stubbornly hard to get everybody on the same page, but apparently it is. And then on top of that, you've got the backroom drama. You've got Nas has got an extension. Randall's got an extension. Rudy just had to make, he took $10 million less, cut $10 million out of the last year, his deal to extend 2 years down the road. All these things are in play. And Finch is a believer, I think, in predictability over, spontaneity in terms of matchups or, wrinkles or something. He is a guy that likes people to have roles and do things. He doesn't change lineups very frequently unless, there's injury issues, and there hasn't been. I quite frankly have found myself thinking about an injury or two would not hurt this team right now. Just being able to shake it up a little and have the excuse to give everybody, to tell Randall, to tell DDV, to tell Rudy, whatever, hey, this is what we have to ride with right now because this is what we're doing, and force them out of this thing. Finch is very much a player's coach, and his player relations, he runs an incredibly harmonious locker room. Conley is a big believer in that. Character guys, whatever. I think in this particular case, somebody's got to be a prick a little bit more often than what has happened. And I think that some people's comfort zones, and you got to start at the top, with Ant and Gobert, and move yourself down. Even, Mike Conley is actually eaten a lot to have to deal with this, but all these people are going to, you're going to have to say.
Ant did though, man. Ant did.
Yeah.
Ant said it. He said it in front of the cameras and everything, right. After the loss to the Kings.
Right. Right.
I just, who's going to enforce that on a day-to-day basis? Because that's even hard to do if you're Ant, to be like every single day. It's like, being
right.
the heavy, right?
But I'm also talking about roles. I'm talking, and obviously they have had problems with effort, but I also think,
less so recently though, for sure, right?
Yeah, no, obviously, yeah. Although, don't you wonder? I think that Jake McDaniels is in a crisis of confidence. I mean, I think he is. I think he is genuinely worried about himself. You can tell by the way he plays on the court. His instincts are.
Well, you think that's just a product of what he's not
terrible
been able to
play?
do offensively?
I think a lot of it is that, but I also think. He dreads early fouls.
Yeah.
Early fouls mean that his whole game gets shifted. And when he gets like 2 in the first quarter, it's a big thing for
Dude,
the
it's
Wolves.
like Cat. It's like when Cat used to do it. You're like,
Yeah,
okay,
right.
like 2
Yeah.
and Cat's to the bench 4 minutes in.
Yeah.
Like that was going to be a tough game for Cat to come back from offensively,
Exactly. And so, and also, I just think that he makes silly turnovers. I don't remember making turnovers as silly as he's made them this year. I mean, things like inbounds or passing to a guy right next to him and having the ball ripped away. He's just been. I worry. I wrote a column about the second timeline guys earlier this year, and then they all turned around and got better for a while, to the point where I wrote a really nice column about McDaniels during his fabulous 10-day honeymoon from the hell he's had otherwise. But even Nas, who I think is been suddenly thrust into a role he wasn't ready for, and is making the best of it again and again and again. The decision-making of all three of those guys still needs development. I mean, to put it mildly, I mean, this team, this is a very long-winded way of saying the court IQ on this team is low. Right. And that you can't have that if you're going to have the aspirations this team has.
I think the cumulative court IQ is low. I think and this is true of all teams, is like that stuff gets exacerbated in poor settings. Mm-hmm. Like, Jaden is having a crisis of confidence on offense because they're daring him to shoot. They're not guarding him. He's put in these weird positions all the time of like, okay, like Chris Paul guarded him on Sunday.
Right.
And it's like, so what do you like? They don't care. They don't care about him. So then do you like have to go through Jaden the whole time? And then Jaden knows that. He's like, well, I got to score on Chris Paul every single time. What happens when he misses, 2 or 3 of those leaners, and he's not doing it there. And then that crushes his confidence there.
It's Chris Paul closet fouls him 4 or 5 times.
True. But like it, as bad as the offensive environment is for Ant, we talked about that with the starting 5. We've clearly been shown the counter positive for Julius with the bench, right? And how that's advantageous to him. That exists for Jaden too. This is a bad offense. He's a part of the reason for why the offensive environment is bad for him. But it's a bad offensive environment for him, the players that he's typically playing with. It'd be nice to get him out in a different, more spread group where he's the one non-shooter out there. Maybe he's at the 4, but that doesn't exist in this current setup too. So he's having the same thing where his production is being depressed, just like Mike Conley's is overall. That group doesn't work. Like that group just it hurts all of them.
Yes.
Sometimes they play good defense, but offensively, that 5 is going to always hurt each other.
All 4 of those guys who were last year's starters, who are starting this year, are not playing as well as they were a year ago.
Yeah.
All 4 of them.
And they're not like, I mean, I guess Mike and Rudy are in their 30s, but like obviously Jaden and Ant are on the come ups.
And I got to think that, you could have blamed it on the wrist earlier in the year with Mike. And when you were talking about Mike, is he washed or not? One of the things that I used to have a much stronger argument for than I do in the last couple of weeks, but his defense was great to start the season. He's been beaten off the dribble a little bit too much lately. Wallace did it a couple of times from the other night, and the team they played before, somebody was beating him off the dribble pretty consistently. But he is, as Finch said, a great chase defender. And he is a smart defender. He slips picks in a way that's much different than Na or DDV. But he is, if he was washed, he would not be able to be as competent on defense as he is, I think.
So do you know? Okay, so last year when the Wolves would play the Thunder, I mean, this is going to tie to Conley defense, I promise.
I'm sure.
How they matched up, right? And so the Thunder started Chet Holmgren, Lou Dort, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jalen Williams, and Josh Giddey last year.
Right.
Do you know who Mike Conley guarded in those?
Probably Williams, right?
He did. Isn't that great? Williams or SGA.
Right.
I was going through my notes yesterday, and he would. I mean, they would kind of start with like Jaden on him, but once
he would take the 4. Remember when we talked about this, like Mike Conley guarding the opposing 4 wasn't. I mean, and what it really was like the guy on watch, and then and there's the troops are coming, and everybody come on over here,
Yes,
my guy's about to get the ball. I can hold him off for a split second, but I'm going to need help.
But that's the thing, though.
I know.
I do think his defense is worse because they got away with that last year. They actually played the Thunder well, and once they particularly it was helped by Rudy was playing off Giddey, and that kind of helps being able to put Mike Conley on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or Jalen Williams.
Right.
And part of it is both of them have gotten better, so Mike probably couldn't do that as much now either, even if he wouldn't have taken a step back. But still, that's not a legitimate option anymore.
You are correct that he's not being able to guard bigs as well as he used to. I think that he's still really good on switches. He's still really good on the perimeter, and he is still good on little things like box outs and But you are right. If you're asking him to be the guy on the deck, letting you know when a much bigger force is about to try to score. Right. He can't hold the fort like that like he used to. You're right about that.
Yeah, and he just I don't know. I mean, that Dallas series, and Mike was earlier in his career an elite defender, like a all defensive team defender. That Dallas series, they just went at him.
Well, but also
he was hurt there. But I'm just saying,
it made Mike Conley the low man on a team with Luka and Gafford and crashing.
He couldn't guard Kyrie. Who are you going to put him on?
I know. Well, I mean, you're right, but that was an unfortunate matchup for him.
And design, but my point is I started thinking about.
I know you're right. Okay. He's not a routinely above average defender. You're right.
Yeah. There's just size, limitations there sometimes. Or like they put him on Harrison Barnes in the Spurs game, right? And Harrison Barnes is going to just get a couple offensive rebounds. Right. That's just going to happen there.
You're right. You're right. He doesn't have he's less versatile than he was last year.
Mm-hmm.
If you put him in the right circumstances, and that globally is one of the problems with the Timberwolves this year, is that they are not a well-rounded rotation team. You cannot have a good offense and a good defense on the court at the same time, maximizing their strengths and being a synergistic unit. You can have it happen for a while on offense. You can have it happen for a while on defense. And you can also lean hard into 2 and 3 and sometimes even 4 player combinations. But you cannot have that full-fledged, here we go, the second unit's coming in, and this is going to be fun too because we know what they're going to do. There's this sense of anticipation now is I'm going to be surprised rather than I want to see how they do with what I know is coming. And now it's like, let's see if this works,
Right.
And what's crazy is Chris Finch is saying the same thing.
Yeah, that is true. So let's just go over the matchups here because this was just one of the 4 times they're playing them this season.
3 times in a space of 11 days.
Yeah, I know that's going to be weird. But still aspirationally,
2 right out of the break.
I know that's weird. Aspirationally, right? You if you're wanting to go to the Western Conference Finals for the Wolves, right? Well, no, but I mean, you're going to need to be able to effectively match up with the Thunder. That's what I'm talking about. And what does that look like? And it is a very different proposition this year of how to match up with this Thunder team versus last year's Thunder team. Last year, again, Gobert on Giddey.
Mm-hmm.
They got to that in the later games of the season, but they locked into that. Cat always guarded Dort.
Mm-hmm.
McDaniels guarded Chet.
Mm-hmm. That is and let's
a weird one, right?
Let's stipulate that the Thunder team we saw last night is not with Alex Caruso or Chet Holmgren.
Right. Right.
I mean, that's just insane.
It's and that's what I'm saying. It's like it's tricky to go through that. So McDaniels on Chet, and then Ant and Conley would kind of switch back and forth between the J-Dub and SGA matchup.
Yeah,
at
the
least
two
according
most
to
talented players.
yeah, right. Yeah. And so that's how they match up with them. And it worked last year. They matched up with OKC well.
Right.
So it's a different equation this season, right? You just put Hartenstein in there.
And Rudy has to take him.
Right. And so that's what I was thinking. It's like,
that's a Rudy guy. If there's a center that Rudy should be on, that's probably the guy.
I get that. I'll just make, and I think I agree with this, but I was thinking about it yesterday. Like, I'm getting to the point where I want Rudy in the roam
lurking
all the time. I'm pushing the limits of it. I'm pushing the limits of it, and I think you could in this matchup push the limits of that a little bit. It would get a little weird, but like you could put Rudy on Wallace in the same way that you put Rudy on Giddey. Like he's shooting like 30% from three on the year. I mean, he might be a better shooter than Giddey, but that's what I'm talking about is like, because I think the way they look at it here is like, okay, well, it's not Giddey anymore. They have better shooters. There's not a place to put Rudy. And I would just like them to approach it with more of an open mind of like pushing the limits of that, because I just think it's the best thing weirdly for this team offensively if Rudy's there, because I think it just lets them be playing more of this offense that generates deflections and turnovers and gets them out running. Like, it's just, to me, that is the identity of this defense. And we see it, or it can just be this extra weapon and whatever. So they didn't do it.
Okay. I know where you're going already now, though. Already. You're going to put DiVincenzo on SGA, aren't you?
See, I don't know. I'm saying it's tricky.
Well, I mean, that to me is what you do. I mean,
I don't know, dude.
DiVincenzo is an aggressive son of a gun.
But SGA killed him. He killed him last night, man.
SGA kills everybody.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure he killed him. I think that there were definitely times. Put it this way, there were a lot of times when DiVincenzo didn't have Rudy lurking behind him because of the unit, the way they play.
Rudy never was lurking last night.
Okay, so if you have DiVincenzo in the starting lineup and you pressing up on SGA, which he can do, one of the things I really like about DiVincenzo's defense is he is a blanket coverage guy. He's a guy who wants to swallow you on the ball. And to have to go through that and then encounter Rudy, I think is a good way to stop.
I agree with. Yeah. We're on the same page here. That's what I'm just saying. It's like,
Well, once you said, all right, you're putting Randall on Hartenstein, whoever is going to be the four on Hartenstein, then I think then you have to have Rudy be the lurker, and it isn't Dort. I really think actually, who did we say McDaniels was going to be on? Jay Will, right?
Well, I mean, what they did is they put him on SGA last night.
Yeah, no, I meant in the future.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the future. I'm just going through what the matchups were last night.
No, but last year, what did they do?
That's the past. Last year they put McDaniels on Chet.
That's who it'll be. I was trying to remember who the guy was, and that's because he didn't play last night.
Right.
You got to put McDaniels on Chet. That is the matchup I am totally committed to.
I would agree with that.
All right, and so then you have, I would not have Conley on the floor for this, I don't think. I would put DiVincenzo on SGA.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Randall on Hartenstein. And then you've got to deal with Jay Will. And who?
Ant's got to guard Jay Will, yeah.
I like that too.
I do too, yeah. I wish they would have at least toyed with, some non-Rudy on Hartenstein stuff. What I'll just read them off. Gobert guarded Hartenstein, Randall guarded Dort, McDaniels guarded SGA, Edwards guarded J-Dub, Conley guarded Wallace. And I just think that personnel alone, even if we let go of our own baggage of wanting to change the starting lineup, that might just be a team that you just have to match up with differently.
Yeah, I do think that Hartenstein is so good around the rim that you need somebody as dedicated as Rudy I mean, Hartenstein did not have a good game last night, and Rudy was the reason.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
You know,
opportunity cost there too.
Yep, absolutely. That's the problem, right? I mean, that's why the Thunder are 27-5. It's like, how do you? First of all, SGA. When I did that piece on the assistant coaches, and I talked to Chris Hansen, he basically explained to me how they changed their entire pick and roll coverage because of SGA, because of his ability to go away from the screen. I mean, everything, all of that stuff. His decision making, he would parse pick and rolls and beat pick and rolls. I mean, people kind of wonder, how in the world is this guy constantly getting free when everybody's paying attention to him? And it's because he's like a quarterback, audibling, against the defense. He'll check down to a pass, or he'll go for the long one, or he'll run a counter play to the left. And some of that has to do with the fact that he can shoot from distance. He can finish at the rim. He can dish when he has to, although that's not his preference. And he can utilize pick and rolls with everybody. I mean, that's another cool Schumann fact from the power rankings the other day, was he's run like small pick and rolls 500 times, and the next best guy is 165. Small pick and rolls,
over.
Yeah. And that's another thing, they got in the lab and they said, here we go. What's incredible is not only did they get SGA for Paul George, but they got like a ton of picks. It's just, they have 13 first-round draft picks between now and 2030. They have 13 first-round draft picks in the next 6 years. More than 2 a year for the next 6 years. I mean, if you just deal some of those guys because I like that guy, imagine having I'll give you half. Imagine having half of your draft pick haul to deal with, to just have. Imagine having 6 first-round picks to help fortify your team in certain ways without losing any real draft capital, because you have 7 other draft picks.
When you already have the number 1 defense by a mile, you're 7th on offense, and you're the 2nd youngest team in the NBA.
It is incredible. I mean, and that's why if the Celtics or the Cavs, I shouldn't sleep on the Cavs as much as I have, because they are this year's Wolves.
The more you watch them, the more you wake up.
Yeah,
because I wasn't watching a lot of them, but I'm like,
well, that offense,
Thunder coming up too.
Yeah, I mean, that Mobley, Mitchell, Garland, they got, and Atkinson, it's amazing how long it took a team to hire him after he got done from the Nets, But
let's talk about the other Eastern Conference team. We'll wrap on Boston.
Sure.
Because yet another test, obviously, of just the quality of opponents. But in a similar sort of way of, they're just going to throw that length that on the perimeter, stand you up, fly around defensively themselves, and then spread you out on the other side of the floor. They don't have KP. That would make this matchup a real issue for the Wolves, because now for Boston to be able to go 5 out, it needs to be Horford at the 5. But that makes them pretty undersized. So you go into this matchup again with the same sort of directives that you had against OKC of like, well, our chance to counter their best offensive look is to impose our size the other direction, which again, this Wolves team has not been as good at doing as the team had last year. But it's another, I don't know. We don't have to preview it all, but it would be really good to show something and be able to take care of that on Thursday, because if you leave that Boston game and if it's a loss at home and it's in a similar sort of fashion, you leave this week being pretty unambiguously a
second
far,
tier.
yeah, a far distance away from.
Well, you're in the pool. You're not
Yeah.
on the side. You know, you're not
Right.
in the driver's seat. You're one of the people like jockeying, and
Yeah.
so and I do think they match up with the Celtics better than they match up with the Thunder, simply because the Celtics are much more classic on-ball defenders. I mean, Derek White and Drew Holiday and Tatum and Brown. They switch things, but they don't. They don't
guard their yard.
They don't trap as much, and they don't fly around quite as much. But they're strong. I mean, all five of those guys are really strong,
and they're strong both sides of the floor too.
True. I think Lou Dort guards Ant as well as anybody in the NBA. I do not think they have a matchup for Ant that is as good as Lou Dort. Ant is always frustrated against the Thunder. Always.
Yeah.
I mean, he pushed Lou Dort and then went crazy when they called him on it. He pushed him. Now, Dort sold a little, obviously, but it was still.
That's what Dort does, yeah.
And you don't have to put two on Ant. Very, very rarely do you have to put two on Ant unless he's going toward the rim off the bounce. But
they would do it like late in the shot clock. Remember, Ant had that crazy like step back.
Yeah, that 3-pointer that was an air ball.
Because he was running away from the second. No, he made one.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Yeah, that's true.
Second quarter.
That at the other end of the court, right? Similar to the game winner against Houston, was it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, but anyway, Dort is. They don't have a brick shit house like Dort.
Oh man, they got Jaylen Brown.
He's very good. And I'm a big Jaylen Brown guy. And I also think their switches, there's no drop off. I mean, White's on you, Holiday's on you, Brown's on you, Tatum's on you. Good luck, But I also think that they don't turn you over as much. Nobody does. But they are a little less opportunistic. I do think there's a little bit more variance because they live and die by the three so much. Now it's a really successful strategy because they're good at it. But if they're not hitting that night, you've got a shot, And so I think they're more vulnerable against this Wolves team than the Thunder are. And all the games, the last three games that they've played, two have gone to overtime, and one was decided by a last-second shot by Nas that clanked.
Yeah.
But KP's
only played in one of those games.
Yeah. Yeah, and KP obviously is a difference maker in that. Do you go out and even try to guard him to some extent? I mean,
yes.
a 7'6" 3-point shooter, though. But how do you do it? I guess it's Randall this time. He's
not yet. He's out. But I
know. But I mean, theoretically, what I'm saying is,
dude, they're not as good as these teams. They're not. That's just what it is. You're right. What I'm saying is, I agree that Oklahoma City presents at this moment as a more difficult matchup for the Wolves than the Celtics do.
Right. Which doesn't mean it's a good matchup.
Right. It's just, I think when you put Porzingis into it, they might be even on a different level. The other thing though that's going on right now, and having watched the last couple Celtics games and having watched the last couple Thunder games, is Boston is playing much more mortal these days.
Yeah, you're right. They're 5-5, I think, or something ridiculous.
Yeah, I watched them lose to the Pacers, who I think are like a diseased team.
I agree. They were the Atlanta Hawks. They're the Atlanta Hawks of this year.
Yeah.
By the way, and the Atlanta Hawks are looking a lot better. Hunter and Johnson are really some really interesting wings. But back to the Celtics, I do think that they'll be there in the playoffs. They're going to be like the Heat were when the Heat were, really locked in with Butler and Bam. And they're so deep. And Pritchard and Hauser give them another dimension. They don't have to change their style at all, when they bring in guys off the bench. whoever their shooting coach is, somebody ought to go hire him. Because Horford became a great shooter there from distance, and Hauser and Pritchard, they're just they and Jaylen Brown and nobody, I think, shoots below 37% on that team, do they? I haven't looked lately, but
I don't.
I
wouldn't think so. I mean, they're all guys you got to respect.
And part of it is they're all open.
Well, I mean, if it's Cornette or Keita is out there, whatever. They do.
I know. Yeah. You're right.
That's actually really
I just love the exotics.
Yeah, right. But
you want a little change of pace, you throw Keita out there. He's like the Taco Fall of 2025.
No, it's actually it works.
I know. No, I'm not denying it. I just think that after you see all these guys who are a certain prototype, and then you have this guy come out.
Yeah, right. Well, I just there will be opportunities while Porzingis is not playing or isn't playing in the game to not be facing a 5-out look, and then Boston starts playing like the Thunder do a little bit more, like 4 out around 1. And that is a significantly better look for the Wolves defense. Is going to be significantly better against 4 out 1 in than they are against 5 out, because Rudy, like last night when Hartenstein wasn't on the floor and he's just guarding whoever else, whether it was Jay Will or Kendrick Williams, he had to guard a lot, and Williams is just spaced to the corner, and like he's gonna hit those. Rudy can't just leave that completely. I'm just a big believer in the Wolves need to be able to have Rudy on somebody he can leave. And that's going to be very hard to do against the Thunder, and
really hard to do against the Celtics,
unless Keita or
I mean, if your backup center comes in,
they're going to play a bunch. But no, they might play him a lot. Do you want to play Horford for 36 minutes, like at the 5?
I would go small, but I guess they don't. I know what you're saying.
It's just like that's the counter.
I mean, Tatum is your 6'8" center, or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe it's like.
I mean, that's what I would do, quite frankly. And they do it anyway. I mean, you got to think that the rebounding.
So just go real small when, and maybe for like a playoff series, they
space and pace. I mean that's but but you're right. I mean, Keita more than Cornette, in my opinion, but. And then, I used to love the days. I mean, they had Time Lord, they had Tice. They have some, they've had some really cool centers.
Sure.
I've never been a Porzingis fan, but even I have to acknowledge, brilliant move. He's really fitting in. Hurt though, which is probably the only trump card you have. Anti-Porzingis folks like me now have to say, well, he's hurt all the time. That's not the only thing.
I think with all of this, what we're saying is a really difficult matchup. I don't think it's true anymore that the Wolves' biggest competition is themselves. I think that actually was kind of true last year. Or wait, that was true last year. Now, there's just sometimes the biggest competition is like the Thunder. If you're playing the Thunder or you're playing, the Celtics or something like that. But I do think. And obviously, even if it was last night or against Boston, because it is a difficult matchup and you are going to have to play with a specific type of discipline and execution to beat them if you're the Wolves, that it could be a jolt in beating them in a way more so than the Houston game proved to be. Houston's like Houston
was immature. Houston let go of the rope.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. I don't think the Celtics are the kind of team that lets go of the rope. Not very often.
Yeah. One last thing. So Joe Mazzulla's goofy, but really interesting to me.
He's turned me around. I mean, I thought he was trash. I mean, I thought he was incredibly defensive when he started.
Oh yeah, and he's still
part of it. He's a rookie, never coached a team, and all of a sudden he's in Boston, for God's sake, with that media, who's really smart and really aggressive.
Yeah.
And he wanted to show he reminded me of like the Sam Mitchell year, only magnified,
Right.
Sam wanted to let everybody know how smart he was, and all he did was became polarizing by doing that.
But I think what Mazzulla is doing is actually talking about to them in an asshole sort of way about smart stuff that they're doing in Boston. I mean,
yes, they are.
What I'm saying,
he has the confidence now to do that. Go ahead.
Yeah, they approach it more like math and with a precision and like a possession after possession after possession sort of thing. And they win on the margins of the possession after possession. They like take a little dime and they put it out every possession. It's like, and then at the end, it's like, here we go. We have $7 worth of dimes. And I don't think the Wolves play that way. And I don't think Finch coaches that way either. And It kind of reminds me about, remember like when the Wolves made the playoffs at the Jimmy year and they played the Rockets?
Yeah.
And the Rockets were just shooting, so many threes. They'd shoot they'd shoot 50 threes and the Wolves would shoot like 28 in every game of that. And there was just a force of magnitude of the math that they had no shot against that Rockets team.
Right.
And I think with some of these teams now, like Boston and Oklahoma City in particular, there's a little bit, it's not just threes, though you could point to that with Boston. There's just an overall style of play that's curtailed to analytic efficiency that they just hit like over and over again, and he'll even say like, I like kind of watching those Missoula press conferences sometimes.
Right. And
it'll be like 12 possessions. We didn't do it, in this one he's like, we give ourselves like an 8 to 12, range of the, it is very mathematical approach. Or it'd be a bad game. It goes, well, we had probably about 19 to 20 possessions in this game where we weren't executing this on the offensive side or the defensive side.
Right.
And I don't know, I'm not in those, the coaches meetings of what it's like with Finch, but I would bet that is not the way that they look at it.
I think Finch coaches as a basketball fan. It's actually one of the reasons I like him so much is, he appreciates the aesthetics of the game. And I think he would not enjoy his job as much if he was, he takes analytics into consideration and obviously uses them a great deal, but he's also interested in the minutia and the impulses. And he's also curious to see what players can do, how players can reveal themselves to him, and then he can work around how they do it. He said as much that he likes to design his playbook around what the players show him in terms of spontaneity. That is the opposite of what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I don't know what's like right or wrong. What I'm hinting at is the glass half empty to it is like, can that Finch style work in an NBA that is going to have more and more Missoula styles? Like,
here's what I would say about that. I would say,
you get what I'm asking there?
I know exactly what you mean, and this actually proves it. Your point is that the way you can have that precision is if you have a great defense, and you don't have to get creative. You have the plan, and if the plan doesn't work that night, you still only give them 98 points, and you might win anyway. Right. You know what I mean? It's like there's a baseline, and that's what happened to the Wolves last year. Their offense was not good, but it didn't matter. And obviously the offenses run certainly by the Celtics and the Thunder are precision offenses designed. In one case, it's a little more heliocentric around SGA than it is in the Celtics, but it is also what you're saying is if X happens, then we do Y. I think that works a lot better when you have a team getting stops and putting you in a good position at the other, obviously it's true no matter what offense you're running, if you have a great defense, it helps. But I do think that it's the kind of, if you run an overly structured offense, or what I regard as overly structured, and you're not successful, then you're screwed twice. You're screwed aesthetically, and you're screwed in terms of winning. You need a bone for the players. They either need to be having fun or they need to be winning. And if you can have both, the ideal situation we're having fun and we're winning, that's the best thing. Finch would prefer, but on the other hand, his principles, quick decision-making, movement without the ball, and moving the ball, are all things that are up to the players.
Yeah. What I was thinking of, to your point, was I was trying to look through to find the clip. I can't find it this quickly, and we should probably end the episode kind of soon. But I asked Rudy about, like, all right, so this starting five's clearly not working. Like, what do you need to do to start, getting back on track? And what he said is like, it just has to start, like, with our defense. We need to be committed to defense in that group. And, like, that's one of those things where you go, I'm like, well, dude, like, the reason I'm asking this question is because you guys scored 12 points in the first 9 minutes of the game. Like, I'm asking about, the offense. But what he's actually saying is, to play the offense better, we have to play defense better, which is what you're saying with these more mechanically driven Thunder and Celtics teams that can afford to play that type of offense because of the defense. Yeah.
And it's like field position in football. If your defense gives your offense a break automatically, if you're out in transition or you don't have to take the ball out of the basket, your offense is going to be better. It's a shame for both Finch and the roster that they are so bad in transition initiative, if nothing else. I mean, it just blows my mind that why not try the most efficient way to play? I mean, but anyway, I digress.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to not let a game like that and a defeat like that and against a team like that be like, yeah, this is like a confirmation of the other issues that we've been seeing all year. And then,
it's limbo. It is the product of limbo. It's product of limbo. You were saying before, the Wolves are not their own worst enemy now. Other teams are. The way I would put it is
both.
Tim Connolly at the end of last year said, "We're at the table. We're at Final Four." So no, you're not at that table anymore. That you are not at the table. You are at the maybe not the little kids table, but you're at the second most important people's table, and you're not going to eat that food until you do something that makes you deserve to get back to that table, because it is, you're 17-15. You deserve your record. It's not like you're underachieving. You have a lot of chaos and noise and limbo in what's going on right now. And you've chosen to not make some really harsh decisions to end that. Right. And that's a choice you've made, and it may turn out to ultimately be the right choice, but the longer it hasn't been the right choice, the worse it looks.
Yeah, and it's on him to get them back to the table, and you do have, Anthony Edwards, one of the best offensive players in the league, and you have Rudy Gobert, one of the best defensive players in the league, as your foundation for, getting them.
And you're running something that is making both underperform right now.
Yep. And that's where the Timberwolves are on January 1st, 2025. That is Happy
New Year.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the reality of the situation. And like you said, and like you closed your column with, it's like, well, this isn't just like death and like pulling your eyes out and
exactly.
They're 17-15. It's you're just mid. Like that's just what it is.
And they are, if you're a Timberwolves fan, and the mid Timberwolves fans who are just ready to poke somebody else's eyeballs out, certainly not their own. It is intriguing. It is never. It may be fairly continually disappointing, but there's always. There has not been, what I said in the last paragraph is it's been a blurry season. And I think that's probably my favorite adjective at the moment for what's going on right now. You see a picture, it isn't a bad picture, it's just a blurry picture. And it's something you would like to see clarified to see how it looks. I get the impression that even if it is clarified, it isn't going to be as pretty a picture as what OKC has. Yeah. But it is still going to be something that's going to be fun to watch and follow and get excited about the development of, if not the rest of this season, in seasons to come.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a good way to leave it. That column, you just sent it to me before we started recording, so I don't know, that'll maybe be out later this afternoon on Wednesday, or maybe it's a New Year's Day, so the editors got up.
I think that MinPost I think begins back in action tomorrow, and since my last column was 2 weeks ago in praise of Jade McDaniels, I wanted to get something out as quick as I could.
Yeah. I get where you're going with that. So I guess if you're listening to this on Thursday morning,
it'll be out today.
Britt's column, right. Yeah, Britt's column will be up there, and it was a good one of looking at kind of where the Wolves are versus the Thunder, obviously in the kind of shadow of the game last night. We went all over the place. That was a good one, Britt. I appreciate you doing it, and I guess we'll see where this team is at in another week and update from there. I'll see you at the end tomorrow.
Sounds good.
Plan for the show. Yeah. Beyond this episode is the no show on Thursday. We won't be recording on Thursday. Have the game on Thursday night. And then Kyle and I will talk about Wolves Celtics we'll record it on Friday morning, be out about noon, 12:30 or whatever, back to normal there, and we'll keep moving. Until then, he's Britt. You can follow him on Twitter at Britt Robson, and on Blue Sky, probably at Britt Robson too. I'm Dane like that, at dot Blue Sky, something, I don't know how it works.
Right. You'll find it.
Yeah, you'll find it. I'm Dane at DaneMooreProductions, and until Friday with Kyle, he's Britt. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.